Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
As far as intros go, one of the least orthodox, but anything goes, especially when it's not a real speaker. But first I want to say that the Prophet Mohammed SAW, he told us in a hadith that when someone loves someone else, they should announce it to them, especially for the sake of Allah. So I love everyone for the sake of Allah SWT, my brothers and sisters. I just want to put that out there. And it's always good to be back with the ISO family, alhamdulillah. We begin in the name of Allah SWT, and alhamdulillah, nahmadu wa nasta'inu wa nastaghfiru wa nastahdihi. ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله تعالى فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. We begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the exalted, the sublime, the most merciful, the bestower of all mercy. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses in His infinite wisdom, knowledge, mercy and compassion to guide, then none can lead astray. And whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses in His infinite knowledge, wisdom, compassion and mercy to lead astray, then none can guide. And we bear witness as Muslims that He is the only one in all of existence that is worthy of our unequivocal, unconditional, unquestioning, unwavering love, obedience, devotion and worship. And that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was His final prophet and messenger. Sending peace and blessings upon him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and his wives and his family members and his companions and all those who follow their footsteps until the day of judgment, begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bestow His favor upon us and make us amongst them. Allahumameen. So Hayaah, it's a big topic, but what I want to start with first is misconceptions about Hayaah. We'll define it in a little bit, but what are some misconceptions about Hayaah? Because there's many, or there are many. It's okay, I graduated. English is no longer, grammar is no longer as relevant, even before you graduate, but anyway. What are some misconceptions that you know about Hayaah? Yes, sir. I told you this place was haunted.
That it only concerns women.
Okay, very good. That only concerns women. I'm bringing this back. Remember this?
Mohammed.
Okay. Sisters, misconceptions about Hayaah. So he said one that only applies to women, or even that it focuses on them. That's a misconception. Sisters, go ahead. Okay, that's the only physical thing. I'm not gonna look. I'm just gonna do this. There's a study somewhere that it keeps you more attentive when something hits you in the head. Yeah.
That it's only shyness from the people.
That only concerns shyness in front of the people. Here you go. I'm throwing my left, so just kind of like a jerk kind of thing. Yeah.
How you dress?
How you dress. Okay, good. I'm just giving out candy for free at this point. Sisters. So it only applies to women or focuses on them. It has to do with the physical thing only. It's restricted there. And that it's restricted to how you dress. All these are misconceptions that are definitely not doing Hayaah justice. And more than that, more than just not doing it justice, they're really limiting it and diminishing it from its true meaning, which we'll get to. Anything else? Anyone has anything else to add? Go ahead, sister. Okay, good. That's strictly about gender interactions. That all these things that we mentioned, they're part, the Hayaah has something to do, or has something to say, or has some input. Oh, I forgot to okay, thank you. About all of this, but it's not just about this. It's not restricted to this. It didn't come to regulate this, or to specify this topic, or this subject, or this gender, or these interactions. Good. So that's pretty much what I had written here, which is what I usually do. I quote you guys for information. You guys already know that. So these are just some of the misconceptions that people have about Hayaah. That's focused on women, or it's their topic that couldn't be further from the truth. That's all physical. It has to do with just the way you dress, or that's the biggest topic in Hayaah. Couldn't be further from the truth either. Or that it is the most relevant or pertinent to gender interactions. That's not true as well. So Hayaah is so much more than that. And to limit it to these things, even though once again these things are relevant, we'll get to them eventually, inshallah. How long do I have?
All night.
Till people start nodding off. Okay. It's like 6 minutes. So we'll get to these things hopefully eventually, but Hayaah is so much more than that. It's so much more important than all of that, and it has so much, relevance to every aspect of our deen. And this is something that, even in preparing this, I was surprised to find that Hayaah is so holistic. It's just like Iman. That's the reality of the matter. It's just like faith. So I want to start first with the hadith of the Prophet Mohammed SAW of Ibn Umar where he said, and this is important for us to get the background information about this topic. Before we get into the topic itself, we need some background information. It's very important. That he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, بَدَأَ الْإِسْلَامُ غَرِيبٌ وَسَيَعُودُ غَرِيبٌ كَمَا بَدَأَ. Islam started as something strange. And it will return to being strange in the same manner in which it was started. فَطُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَاءِ. So glad tidings to the strangers. Why is this important? What makes the believer and the deen of Islam something strange? What made it strange back then, and what will make it continue or return to be something strange amongst the people? The reason for this is, anyone want to take a stab at it first? What makes Islam strange? Yes, sir.
It doesn't follow the customs of the society.
It doesn't follow the customs of society, or it clashes with customs of society. That'd be a better way of putting it, because it doesn't reject all of them. Yes, sir.
It's something more public, like
I got you.
like it's not like you stay like in a church or something, and that's like the only time you're Muslim or whatever.
Why does that make it strange?
Because it's something more public, so people will recognize that you're Muslim by the way you act, by the way you talk, by the way you do.
So it's not just a religion; it's a way of life. Okay. There you go. Anyone has any other input? What makes Islam something strange?
There are many things that deal with, like, you have to have faith in order for you to believe in them. So some of it is not sort of realistic at the time, so it's strange.
It has supernatural aspects to it beyond physical perception. Okay, good. So, included with everything that everyone said so far, one of the things that make Islam strange, or one of the greatest things that make Islam strange, is that the Muslim, the person who adheres to this way of life, the believer, the purpose for their existence, the very purpose for their existence, is something that most people give the backseat, right? Their religion and Allah, God. That's something that is secondary for most people, or for many people. It's something that doesn't dictate, for example, the way they eat, sleep, dress, interact with one another. For most people, or for many people, religion and God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are given a sidelined role, like Adam was saying, to a specific place or time, right? And this is what Deen, religion, God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's the position they have in people's lives. They're sidelined to a specific time or place or ritual, and that's it. But for the Muslim, it's a holistic concept. Deen is everything that I do, like Adam said. Deen is how I eat, and how I sleep, and how I dress, who I have a relationship with and who I don't. The words that I speak and the aspirations that I have. The goals that I reach for and the words that I write. All of that is tied to my deen, and as per the command and with the blessings and the ordainments of Allah, Almighty God. So that makes the Muslim and the deen of Islam, when followed to the T, followed correctly, something strange. It's weird that you choose to live like that. It's weird that you don't make your desires the number one, determinant of what you say and what you do and what you reach for. It's strange that you don't function on a carnal level like so many other people. What feels good, I do it. What appears to benefit me directly in an independent, selfish manner, I say and I reach for. But you as a Muslim, you function differently, so that makes you strange. Also, the goals, the standards, the aspirations that Islam demands we reach for and hold ourselves to are very high. So Islam demands, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demands from us, that we reach for very high standards. That we hold ourselves according to very lofty aspirations. You need to be so special, so sincere, so truthful, so honest, so modest. Right? All these qualities and characteristics and more that were taught to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Sunnah, you're demanded to reach as far as you can for all of these. Hold yourself to this standard. And that, if you can do that, makes you very strange. Because you function on such a higher level, you hold yourself to such a higher standard. And it's important to mention this before Hayaah, because Hayaah is one of those characteristics. It's a very lofty goal. It's very far. You gotta reach with a lot of effort. You have to be very determined. If you hold yourself to Hayaah, if you function based on this Hayaah, and I'm purposely saying it as Hayaah, not translating it, because there's no translation that does it justice, as we'll see. It's more than just shyness. It's more than just bashfulness. It's more than just modesty. It's all these things and so much more. So if someone holds themselves to true Hayaah, they have true Hayaah as they should in every aspect of their lives, then they're going to be very strange. Because they're going to function on such a higher level, they're going to hold themselves to much higher standards than the average person and even the average Muslim. So that brings us to the definition. What is Hayaah? What do you think Hayaah is? What is Hayaah to you? How would you define Hayaah if you were asked, or for yourself? There's a pocket full of candy, like, if you guys make me eat all this when I go home, I'll get mad cavities. Can't afford another hookah now. Yes? Self-respect, that's definitely part of it. Yes? Modesty, okay, it's part of it as well. Any other definitions that come to mind? Because like you said, it's not just one of these things, it's so much more. So modesty, integrity, behavior, modest behavior, shy behavior, all of that is incorporated in the meaning of the word Hayaah. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says the word Hayaah comes from the word Hayaah, which is, it's a similar sounding word, and Hayaah means life. Because he said, and many scholars agreed with this definition, that Hayaah, this characteristic that we're talking about, this modesty, this shyness, this integrity, this holistic integrity, which would be a good word, it is a characteristic of the living heart. A heart that has Hayaah, which means life. And a heart that is dead would have no Hayaah, will have no complete integrity. And in accordance with how much integrity and modesty and shyness is in this heart, you can gauge how much this heart is alive, or it's a dead heart. A heart that is not connected with its Lord, not connected with its purpose. So, one of the definitions that was given by Sheikh Hatem Hajj, Hafidhahullah, he said, it's like a holistic integrity. It's a behavior of the nafs, of the soul, the inner spirit, a characteristic, a quality, that if it truly has it, then it's a mannerism it comes from the interior. It's a mannerism that comes from the interior that will prevent the possessor of this Hayaah from anything that is shameful or blameworthy. So it's a characteristic of the soul on the inside, like Iman. Its manifestation, if a person has it, possesses this Hayaah, then it will prevent them from anything that is blameworthy or shameful. Anything that is worthy of being spoken against by whether it's themselves or the people or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the first and foremost of them. So it's a feeling, a quality, a principle that demands total morality, total integrity in every aspect of life. Even in the thoughts that you have. So Hayaah, you see, it's huge. So much more than how you dress or the words that you say. And it causes also one of its manifestations in the possessor, aversion to anything that is contrary or contradictory to any of these things. To total integrity, to honesty, to morality, anything that is in contradiction to these principles, then if a person has Hayaah, it'll lead them to feel averse towards these things. Is that clear, or did I make a mess of things? Everyone's happy? People don't look happy. Then again, in this college. That's a funny laugh. He's like, yeah, it's true. I feel you, man. A few more years. So, how important is Hayaah? How big of a deal is it? The Prophet Mohammed ﷺ said in one hadith, لِكُلِّ دِينٍ خُلُقٍ وَخُلُقُ الْإِسْلَامِ الْحَيَاءِ. Every religion, every way of life has a signature characteristic, a hallmark characteristic. And the hallmark of this deen, of our religion of Islam, total submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Almighty God, is this hayaah. This total social and personal and divine integrity inspired in a person or instilled in a person. So it's the hallmark quality of our deen. The signature quality of a Muslim should be this hayaah, this total modesty. And he further said in one of the narrations of this hadith, مَنْ لَا حَيَاءَ لَهُ لَا دِينَ لَهُ. Whoever doesn't have this hayaah, they don't have deen. They don't have deen if they have this hayaah, this total integrity and modesty. And the hadith of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, الْحَيَاءُ وَالْإِيمَانُ قُرَنَاءُ جَمِيعًا. Hayaah and iman, this total integrity or modesty, and faith are two parts of a whole. They go one hand in hand. They go together. فَإِذَا رُفِعَ أَحَدُهُمَا. If one of them is lifted, one of them is forsaken, one of them is forgotten, رُفِعَ الْآخَرُ. The other one follows suit. Meaning someone who has no faith, they will automatically have no hayaah. And someone who diminishes their hayaah and ignores it and it gets downtrodden and downplayed and ignored, then their faith will follow suit shortly thereafter. So they go together hand in hand. And hadith of Abi Mas'ud Uqba ibn Amr radiallahu anhu, he said that the قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن مما أدرك الناس من كلام النبوة الأولى إذا لم تستحي فاصنع ما شئت, or إذا لم تستحي فافعل ما شئت. أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم in different narrations. The hadith of Uqba ibn Amr, he said that the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم said, what has reached us of previous prophethood, part of previous religions, something that was revealed to other messengers before me, and that has reached the people, reached us, is that if you have no hayaah, do as you please. If you have no shame, then do as you please. And the scholar said there's two interpretations to this. The first one is that it's a license. It's an open statement. If there's no shame in what you want to do, what you want to say, then knock yourself out, do it. You shouldn't hold yourself back if it's something that isn't considered shameful or blameworthy. Do it. Don't be timid. Be a pioneer. Be outright. Be someone who's outspoken. If it's something that has no shame in it, it's not shameful, it's not evil, it's not blameworthy in your eyes, in the eyes of the people, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost, then don't be timid. You shouldn't be afraid to be outspoken or to take initiative, things of this nature. And this was the opinion of An-Nawawi, rahimahullah, and others. Other scholars, they said, no, it's a threat. That if you have no shame, do as you wish. You have no filter, there's nothing holding you back from evil, blameworthiness, or the opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His commands and His ordainments and the opinions of the people and yourself, they have no effect in what you do. You just act freely, then go ahead. But you will be accountable for that. Similar to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Surah Fussilat, اعملوا ما شئتم إنه بما تعملون بصير. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do as you will, but know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all seeing of what you do. He's going to hold you accountable. It's not a license or an open statement to do as you wish. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling you, you're free. He gave you that free will. He gave you the ability to choose and the freedom to choose, and the accountability is later. So it's either way, as the scholars have said, when two meanings are not divergent or not clashing with one another, it could easily be both. There's no reason why both meanings can't be true. So if there's nothing shameful in what you want to do, what you want to say, then do it. Don't be afraid if there's nothing blameworthy in that action. And also, if a person has no shame, they're free to do as they will, but they will be accountable before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he also said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Al-Hayaah la ya'ti illa bi khayr. This characteristic of modesty, of integrity, of shame, of shyness, of bashfulness, it doesn't come except with good. There's no negative aspects of this quality, of this mannerism. This modesty, if you lived by it, if you held yourself to it, there's nothing bad going to happen to you as a result of it. It will only bring about good in this world and the hereafter. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is telling us that this is a praiseworthy quality. That it is fundamental to being a Muslim, to believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That it goes hand in hand with your iman. It's the hallmark of our deen. And it's been part of the other religions and other teachings of other prophets as well. It's very important. Can't be taken lightly, can't be sidelined, can't be restricted to just one topic or another. So where does hayaah belong? Who should you have hayaah from or in front of? Who should be shy in front of? What should make you modest? What does it mean? All these questions become incumbent once we see how big of a deal it is. So first and foremost, hayaah belongs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The hadith of Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he said that the Prophet ﷺ told the companions in a gathering once, "Istahyu min Allahi haqq al-hayaah." Have hayah of Allah, be modest in front of Him, be ashamed in front of Him, be shy of Him, as He truly deserves. So they said, "Inna nastahi min Allah." O Messenger of Allah ﷺ, we do. We are ashamed in front of Allah. We are shy from Him. So He told them ﷺ, that's not what I'm talking about. You don't understand how big of a deal this is. You don't understand what it truly means to be ashamed in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said ﷺ, "Man istahya min Allahi haqq al-hayaah, falyahfaz al-ra's وما وعى وليحفظ البطن وما حوى وليذكر الموت والبلى ومن أراد الآخرة ترك زينة الدنيا فمن فعل ذلك فقد استحيا من الله حق الحياة." What does it mean to be shy in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? To be ashamed in front of Him, to hold yourself with total integrity and morality in front of your Lord, the one who sees and knows at every single instant. What does it mean to hold yourself properly in front of Him? He said sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he listed a couple of things. First, it is to safeguard the head and what it contains. To safeguard your head, your mind, and what's in it. Meaning your thoughts, meaning your perception, meaning your opinion, meaning your principles. Right? They all start in the head before the heart, that you understand. So you safeguard that and what you put into it. How you mold it. How you make your decisions. Where does that all come from? I'd be ashamed after recognizing the one true God and the purpose He created me for, and recognizing the legislation that He set down for my well-being, for society's well-being, for the good of every single living thing, for the good of this world. After recognizing all that and understanding its importance, then saying, well, I have a different opinion. Or, well, I don't think that's right, Because it's not just an opinion, this is divine legislation, revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Each one of us as Muslims, if we ask ourselves, or even non-Muslims ask themselves, is God all-wise? Yes. Is God almighty? Yes. Is He all-merciful? Yes. All-seeing, all-just. All these things, part of majority of people's belief in God is that's true. So it only makes sense if He commanded something, we would be unable to say anything else except we hear and we obey. It only makes perfect sense that if we recognize and acknowledge that this is legislation from God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this, and I believe in that. And I believe all these qualities that we said about Him. Why would I have a different opinion? Why would I not force my mind and my intellect to conform with that? Why do you guys come to college? Because you recognize, this is a tricky question, I know, but you recognize that here you're searching for higher learning. Whether that happens or not is a whole different story, I know. But the point is, you recognize that you're coming here searching for higher education. That in putting yourself in this institution and paying a lot of money and subjecting to yourself to these hours and this work, you're receiving something you couldn't have received elsewhere. Through not just specifically Brooklyn College, but through this Institute of Learning College. Thank you, sir. Jazakallah khair. So when you come to that class and the professor begins to teach, you accept that their experience, or you hope that with their experience and their pursuit of this knowledge through all these years and all this, that they're going to give you something that's correct. So you accept that. You come knowing that you're not an expert in that subject, so you're receiving it from the expert, supposedly. Think idealistically, guys. I know. I know exactly what's going through your mind. So I'm speaking on an ideal level of what it's supposed to be like. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the example of Him is so much greater than that. Right? Because we joke about it, but the fact of the matter is that you could be taught by someone who doesn't know what they're speaking about in college. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the example is so much higher, so much greater. That through logic and deduction and reasoning and thinking about your purpose and your origin and your conclusion and this world, you come to the realization as a Muslim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the truth, and His legislation is the truth. But after doing all that as Muslims, once again speaking from a Muslim perspective, many of us, we say, well, I'm not entirely convinced of this legislation. I'm not entirely convinced of the usefulness of salah. I'm not entirely convinced of submitting and conforming my own opinions. So you see that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, you don't hold yourself properly in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not holding ourselves properly in front of our Lord and Creator if we think that way. So it's not a call to suspend your thinking or accept illogical fallacies. That's not what the Prophet ﷺ is saying at all. But saying as soon as you recognize who Allah is, and that you recognize logically that what is you're being told or taught or reading is coming from Him, then you accept it, knowing that it's only for your benefit, even if you can't see it right now. Because you recognize who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. That's the core of it. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he gives a good example. He said the example of all of this, once again, it's important to stay on this for a little bit, because some people, they confuse what we're saying with Islam or true submission to Allah, or Hayaah in front of Allah, shame in front of Him, means that you suspend your thinking. Doesn't matter whether it makes sense or not, or you see a benefit or not, just do it. That's what Islam is calling you to do. No. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said the example of all of this is like a person who comes to a town, a village. He's a foreigner, and he's seeking religious advice from a big scholar that he knows is there. So he's told by a commoner, by someone who inhabits that city or village, here he is. This is who he is, this is where he lives, and he directs him to it. So he goes there and asks questions and accepts this knowledge because this is a scholar that is so reputable that everyone knows that he's worldwide. In his fame and his knowledge and his integrity is attested to, and his sincerity, etc. So he said that is the job of the intellect, to direct you towards the truth. Once you're sure that this is the truth, then you accept everything as coming from it as beneficial and as rightly guided, because you recognize the source of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and what He's revealing. So he said, someone who holds himself properly in front of Allah, he said sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he safeguards the head, the mind, and what he puts in it, where he directs it. وَلْيَحْفَظِ الْبَطْنَ وَمَا حَوَى, and he safeguards the stomach and what it contains. That part of recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's endless wisdom and infinite compassion and knowledge. He decreed some things to be permissible and some things not. So you safeguard what I put in here, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me this body as a trust. And He commanded that I obey and live accordingly for my own benefit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need it. He doesn't increase in anything. But He commanded that I hold myself to a certain standard regarding my food and drink even. This is good for you, this isn't. This will help you, this will harm you. He created all of it. So He's the only one who has the unequivocal right to make this criteria. So I accept that. And I would be very careful of opposing that, knowingly or unknowingly. I try my best to make sure that I only put in this container, this stomach He gave me, what He permitted, what He made allowed. وَلْيَذْكُرُ الْمَوْتَ وَالْبِلَى وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ تَرْكَ زِينَةَ الدُّنْيَا. He said, and those, once again, who hold themselves with proper integrity in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are shy in front of Him with the proper shyness, who are ashamed in front of Him to hold themselves otherwise, then they also remember death and calamities. And as a follow-up, he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and whoever desires the hereafter, the everlasting life, the more worthy life, the endless reward and provision and sustenance without any more commands, without any more difficulties, then let him abandon or leave behind the glitter of this world, the decorations around them of this world. So let them remember death and calamities, afflictions, and if they truly desire the hereafter, and they're thinking of holding themselves properly in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they abandon the glitter of this world. So this means that they don't get distracted thinking this world's the purpose. They don't make this worldly life their purpose. I need to have the best food, and the best clothes, and the best car, and the best position, and the happiest family. No, remember that you're going to die, and that there's calamities. There's not a single person in all of existence, Muslim or not, who doesn't go through both of these. Calamities and death. Death being the ultimate end, the destroyer of all pleasures, the end of this worldly life, the end of the test, this temporary life. And calamities, everyone's afflicted. For this person it's loss of wealth, for this person it's loss of life, for this person it's sickness, for this person it's whatever it could be, being cast out of their home. Every single person's afflicted. There's no exception. That's the test of life. To remind us that this isn't home. That you're not going to be here forever. That you have a higher purpose. That you're looking so much further than this temporary life that's going to end before you know it. No one knows it's better than college students, right? You put your head down at 12, And before you finish blinking, it's 6 p.m. Right? You're checking who pranked you, who moved the clock up. Nobody. That's how you slept, but you don't feel it. Tomorrow, that's going to be our entire lives. That's the fact of the matter. That this entire life will be like that. Quick, tell me 10 memories that happened when you were 4 years old, when you were 5 years old. Give me 10 memories in each year. You won't be able to. And even if you were able to, we'd be here forever while people try to think of 10 significant memories or even insignificant memories at each age since you were able to remember. Why? Because that's the nature of this life. It passes by and it's over and it's insignificant. It's a distant memory. It's an afternoon nap. So he said, ﷺ, someone who knows all this and wants to hold himself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala properly, be a properly moral person in front of Allah with integrity, with shame, holding themselves properly, remember all this. And the opposite of that would be to make this life the purpose, to be distracted by it, to seek every single little thing, every single enjoyment, every single thing as if this life was eternal. That would be someone who's not ashamed of Allah, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who doesn't hold themselves properly, because that's completely contrary to the reality of this world. And then he said, ﷺ, whoever does all these things, then he has been properly ashamed in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shy in front of him, and held himself properly with moral integrity. So it's a big goal. It's not small. It has to do with everything that we do and say and believe. It has to do with all of our goals. It has to do with our temporary, concepts to the principles that we live our lives by. It's a huge concept. And not doing it like this, the converse of this tells us that you're not holding yourself properly in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not being ashamed in front of Him as you should be. The all-seeing, the all-hearing, the all-aware subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn Rajab, rahimahullah, he said, if you want to have hayaah in front of Allah, you want to be modest in front of Him, hold yourself properly, then you have to do 3 things. First is to make the dhikr of Allah, remember Him, constantly sing His praises and mention His perfection and thank Him and seek forgiveness from Him, constantly be mentioning Him at all times. And the wisdom behind this is that if you're constantly, for example, saying Bismillah, before you do everything, before I drink, before I put on my shoes, before I change clothes, before I enter the bathroom, before I leave my home, before I enter my car, every time I'm about to do something, I say in the name of Allah. I mention His name over everything. Constantly making dhikr. And I make that my habit. When I'm about to do something sinful, something I know is incorrect, something that should make me feel ashamed, make me feel shy in front of Allah, but I'm suspending that for the temporary gratification. I'm suspending that because in a moment of weakness, of ignorance. I'm suspending that because I feel maybe, I have a lot of good things and I'm deluded by the few actions I have. If I'm suspending that temporarily, but it's my habit, it's second nature. Before I do anything, I say Bismillah. Right away you'll hesitate. It's my habit, say Bismillah for everything, or to mention Allah over everything. Now I'm about to do a sin and I was about to say His name. I'll feel some shame. I'll feel shy. Automatically, and this is something many people said about themselves, relating their own stories, that help them wake up, to feel ashamed, to feel shy. I'm about to say His name, and even if I don't say His name, I know He's still aware. I know He's still there. And this is something, as one of the Salaf said, لَا تَجْعَلَ اللَّهَ أَهْوَنَ النَّاظِرِينَ إِلَيْكَ. Don't make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the least significant of the observers to you. That you're constantly watching who's observing, who's around right now. Don't make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the least significant of them when He is the only one who's ever present, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So first is mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. Second is to remember His blessings. This couldn't be stressed enough. Remember the blessings of Allah. Because as the scholar said, there is no sin that is done except it is done with the blessing of Allah. If it's looking at something we shouldn't be looking at, or using our eyes. How many people have eyes but can't see? How many people were deprived of this blessing of vision for one reason or the other? How many people were tested with blindness? If I'm about to go somewhere that I'm not supposed to be going and I know that, remember the blessing of having the ability to get up and choose where I want to go. Some people have to be pushed around. Some people have to wait for someone to have some free time to take them to the bathroom. Remember the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will force you to be humble, force you to be shy. Be ashamed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That He gave me all of this. And I have the audacity to use it in something that I know He said no to. That's not having proper shame in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we need to do that more often. Not just click like and click share, but to watch a video on our own. You don't have to share with everybody. Not that that's wrong in and of itself, but meaning look, try to use some alone time with it. One of those videos about poverty, one of those videos about people who are tested with afflictions, you can click like and share. I'm not saying that's not allowed or it's not good. I'm saying give it some alone time first. Let me look and think for 10, 5, 20 minutes, this documentary about blindness. And then look around and see how many colors and how accurate my vision is and how much I was blessed. You'll get so much further in terms of how you hold yourself first and foremost in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thirdly, he said, rahimahullah, so first was what? To hold yourself properly in front of Allah. What do you need to do first? Dhikr. Second, sisters? Remember the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Good. Thirdly, he said is keep company of modest people. Keep the company, try to seek out the company of people who hold themselves to this standard. Because if it's just you, in a circle of 10 or 20 or 5, then it's hard to go against the grain. It's hard to be that one salmon swimming upstream. But they usually do it together, right? Then one of them gets caught by a bear, but that's not important. But the point is, do you do it all together? Because on your own, it's so much harder. There's so much against you. Besides not just the current, but others going the opposite direction. Try to seek out people who are similar in seeking this goal, even if you're not there yet. That's fine. But they have the same principle in mind. We want to hold ourselves properly, first and foremost for the sake of Allah, in front of Him, because we believe in Him as our divine, perfect creator and final judge, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So first and foremost, and definitely most importantly, hayaah, modesty, shame, is in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I need to hold myself to the standards He put, the aspirations that He drew, the map that He outlined, because in it is my benefit, my well-being in this world and the next. And I believe that I'm so convinced of that, I believe in it so wholeheartedly that I'm going to drive myself to live to this standard, even if it's hard, even if I'm going to lose some friends, even if I have to change every aspect of my lifestyle. Any questions about this so far? Feel free to throw something at me or shout an interruption. If you have something to say, I don't mind. So first and foremost from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the most important. Second and third, you can switch between them. They're not necessarily in terms of importance. The first and most important is hayaah in front of Allah. Second is from the people. A lot of times we say, well, culture has nothing to do with Islam. And there's a lot of cultural practices that don't have anything to do with Islam, that were incorporated in there, that people were just raised upon and they thought it was Deen or thought it was religion, and it's not. But the fact of the matter that is, culture does play a role in our Deen. That is indicated to us by the Prophet Mohammed ﷺ, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, and by the teachings of the companions and the scholars for every single generation in Islamic history. Culture does play a role. What does that mean? Culture can't make something that is haram, halal, or the opposite. Doesn't play that big of a role. Doesn't dictate the way we live our religion or implement our religion. But it does have a say in the things, for example, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't directly reveal, or that the Prophet ﷺ didn't speak about. Things like the foods you eat, right? Or the way you dress within this structure of modesty. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to abide by our cultures and not to go to clash with them in the sense that we will be outcasts or that will go against the grain in the negative way. That everyone will look at us weird, that we won't have a place in society. No, we should follow our cultures in the sense that we don't become blameworthy. For example, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he conquered Mecca at the end of his life, that he came back to Mecca victorious and the people began entering Islam in huge numbers. They all accepted him as the one unequivocal leader and as the messenger of Allah ﷺ. He told Aisha, if it wasn't for your people, meaning Quraysh, our people, our culture, being new to Islam, I would have brought down the Kaaba and rebuilt it according to its original foundations. The Kaaba was built a specific way by Ibrahim a.s. and it was like that for generations, and at some point they changed the foundations, they changed the way it was shaped. It was more of a rectangle than a cube, but they downsized it for many reasons. One of them being that they didn't have enough money that they considered pure enough to rebuild it after a flood. So they said it was going to be a cube instead of a rectangle because we don't have enough money to extend it. So he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I would extend it, I would bring it back to its original shape and form, and it's supposed to have 2 doors, one at each end, and be at ground level. Be at ground level so people can enter and exit freely, but Quraysh, let's raise it, that way no one can enter or exit except who we allow, and there's only 1 door, and we have the keys. So they changed the structure of the Kaaba. All of this was not correct, it was wrongdoing. But he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm going to leave it like that because they're new to Islam. Meaning they just entered Islam, all of them. If I were to do something like this, it'd be outrageous. They'd be like, okay, wait, we accepted the Deen, but now you're changing too much. So there's a lot to say about this. Like, for example, some scholars said Allah SWT didn't command him to do it. This is something that he just wished to do to return it to its original shape and form. But if it was a command of Allah, it would be irrespective of what the people think or feel. Because this is a direct command from Allah SWT. But the point of this is that he took their culture into consideration. Their level of Iman, their level of faith, and where they were coming from, and what had they just been doing. The kufr and the shirk and the fighting against the Muslims, etc. So the point is that we should take that into consideration. Meaning, what does your culture, your family, your tradition, your society consider blameworthy? Part of Hayaah is not to do that as well. Part of holding yourself with complete integrity, with perfect modesty, to be perfectly shameful and shy as you should be, as a Muslim, that high aspiration that Allah and His Messenger ﷺ are commanding us to hold ourselves to, is to refrain from these things as well. For example, if I come into my house with a backwards cap, my mom will slap me. Right? In American culture, in our culture that we're born and raised with already, there's nothing wrong with that. But for my mom, it's irritative. It's you're rude, right? You have no manners because your cap is backwards. To me, that might not make sense because I'm raised in a different culture. I'm not from wherever. But the point is the fact that I recognize that this culture disapproves of it, even if it's not haram. And this is one of the most important points about Hayaah. It's not just about things that are haram. You should abide by anything that your culture considers blameworthy, to the best of your ability, as long as it doesn't clash with the revelation, with what Allah SWT commanded and forbid us from, and with what His Messenger ﷺ taught. If it doesn't clash, you should abide. Is it haram? No, but at the same time you're trying to hold yourself to a higher standard that extends past haram and halal, forbidden and permitted. It's also how my culture functions. Maybe when you go outside you can dress differently where it's not considered rude, it's not considered blameworthy, but at home I have to abide by this culture. Hayaah is that as well. That I wouldn't hold myself in a way that my culture or society will consider me blameworthy or worthy of, being spoken against or denounced. And once again, this is limited to things that don't clash with the revelation. So is that clear? I'll give you another example. Can you think of any examples? That way it's not a one-way street. It's a two-sided conversation. Better. Some people are like, what's one-way street where? What are some other examples? Come on, somebody has to have something. I'll sit here. Huh? I don't feel awkward ever. I'll sit here for 15 minutes. Go ahead, sister.
Well, the idea of ayab haram.
Yeah.
In Arab culture or Desi culture or whatever culture, like background-wise, for instance, if a guy speaks to a girl, it is ayab, but it'll be like, oh, it's okay for him, niswanji or whatever, doesn't matter. For a girl, she does it and she's shamed for life. Do you understand? Like,
Yeah.
That.
No, you're right. We're getting to this towards the end, but keep going.
Yeah, I mean, like that to me, like that whole concept of ayab haram, that being part of the culture where instead of haram being cursed and then that being ayab,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're close, so I'm just going to put it here so I don't get in trouble. But the idea of ayab and haram. Ayab are things that are blameworthy. Right? Like if you walk in, if my parents walk in and I have my foot, well, you can't see my feet, but if I have one leg over the other, that's the height of ayab. And I won't have the chance to explain, right? Because it's going to rain hands, right? Pretty quickly. So, but there's ayab, which is blameworthy things in culture, and they don't always agree with Deen. But you should abide by them for the sake of your Hayaah. Because Islam does command us to safeguard our honor. You don't want to walk into a gathering, and like you said, they're going to say that it's Niswanji. This is a man who is a player, basically, in the colloquial of our... If you're talking to sisters or other females in your class for an educational purpose. And that's entirely it, and it was appropriate, and it was held to the proper standards, and you did nothing wrong. Whether it's a brother or a sister, male or female. it was all the Islamic guidelines were upheld, and you didn't break any of the rules of gender interactions in our deen, and you kept it professional, educational. Despite all that, people will say something, because people are people. So in that case, it might be part of complete hayat to avoid it. It's not haram, and you did everything right, and the Sahaba interacted this way, and they were better than us 1,000 times, and there were no players among them, and there were no people of low moral character among them. But the people are the people at the end of the day, and Islam does recommend for you highly, command you to uphold your honor. You don't want people to say, this is a player, or this is a sister who has no regard for her image in front of others. The people are wrong in this regard. Because once again, you uphold your character and the standards to where it's supposed to be. But at the same time, just to avoid all that, you try to circumvent the need for these interactions. It doesn't sound fair for some people, or it doesn't sound like too strict. And once again, we're not talking about haram, halal anymore. We're talking about hayat in front of the people. So, it's not saying that it's haram to interact with your co-workers or your students, or that you should avoid that at all costs. That's not the answer either. But at the same time, limiting it for the sake of hayat in front of the people could be praiseworthy. You might need to do that. Rather, you might have to do it at certain circumstances. Like for example, in a gathering where it's mostly people from back home. Right? It's a gathering of mostly aunties and uncles. For you to completely avoid this scenario, just for the sake of your hayat, realizing that in this scenario, in this gathering, it's going to work against me. It's going to violate my hayat in front of the people, or not necessarily violate it, but bring it down in their eyes. Even though it's not true, once again. So, yes sir.
About wearing the kufi. Sometimes you could pray in the masjid, and if it's like a Pakistani masjid or others, they really get at you that, you're praying without a kufi.
Right, so praying without a tubi or a kufi, something on your head. They consider that a very big deal in some masajid, and some, according to some madhahib. So for you to put it on just because realizing that this will cause greater benefit than harm, or not putting on will cause greater harm than benefit, would be a concept where you're worrying about what people say in a way that's not wrong. Because you're safeguarding your image, your integrity in front of them. Even though it doesn't diminish from your integrity to violate either of these examples that we just said. Your true integrity is not violated if you do it correctly, but you're looking out in front of your image in front of people, which is still warranted. It's only a problem when you worry about how you look or what people think, when that's the number one thing. What will people think? How will people react? When that's the number one drive behind what you say and do, that's a problem. But when it's secondary and you're watching out for your image, there's nothing wrong with that. Realizing that you're obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala along every step of the way. Another example, chewing gum. If you chew gum in front of a lot of elders, they're just like, what is this? You have no shame. Right? No shame at all. Chewing gum, look at the way you're blowing bubbles. They bring up the weirdest things. And for them, it's the height of aib. You're in their eyes, you sunk so far. Wearing shorts, right? For the males, if you come to the message in shorts already, oh man, you might as well have killed somebody. So, is it haram to pray in shorts? No, if the shorts are covering your knees and you're properly covered and your back doesn't show when you make sujood, you didn't violate anything. But at the same time, you realize that the integrity could be violated in the eyes of the people, so it's better to avoid it. So it's a higher standard, once again, that extends past haram and halal, because you're worried about your honor and your image, and you don't want to be known as this, or a liar, or untrustworthy, or immoral, even though it's not true. So this is important to keep in mind as well. Any questions regarding that? We'll get a little bit more about gender relations in a bit, inshallah, if you guys don't mind. If you guys get bored, we can do it another time. Don't mind, come back, Matt will do or something. I'll come back, don't mind. Okay. Depends what they have for food. So first, hayat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how you hold yourself in front of Him. To what level of integrity will you hold yourself in front of Him? And that's what the Prophet ﷺ described himself in the hadith we mentioned. The second is hayat from in front of the people. And that depends a lot, sadly, on what they consider to be integrity. Even if it clashes with the deen, sometimes in certain regards, it's okay to abide by it. As long as not, certain violations are not okay, where you're commanded to do something haram, or break an obligation. But if it's something like, for the examples we mentioned in that realm, then it's okay to abide by them. And the intention is, I don't want my integrity to drop, I don't want to be known as someone with no hayat. So once again, when is it okay, even if it's not directly in accordance with the deen? The examples that we mentioned. Things that are not haram or halal that you're violating, haram or obligation, and there are things that are secondary or branches, things on the outskirts that would make more sense to abide by them even if they're technically incorrect or not justified. I hope that's clear, inshallah. So the third type of hayah that we should have is hayah from ourselves. And this is something that no lecture can really do, and it's even, I feel ashamed to say it. But we should have hayah from ourselves, what Allah SWT wa ta'ala gave us. Like if we did some introspection, just by ourselves in the corner somewhere for like 15 minutes, how much has Allah given me personally? He's given me a lot. How much has He saved me from? He saved me from so much. How many times did He come through over and over for me personally? I would be ashamed of a lot of things I do, whether they're haram or halal or not. The standards that I hold myself to. I prayed Fajr late today, it's okay, next time. I'm going to try better. It's, I missed this goal that I set for myself deen-wise, it's okay, next time. If I had hayah of myself, of my personal life, of, in front of myself, what I know about myself, these standards wouldn't be okay. I'd reach so much further. I'd seek to do so much more, because I know myself. I know that Allah SWT wa ta'ala gave me the ability to do so much more. I know the blessings He gave me are so huge. I know the opportunities that He gave me, I can't count them. I know the sins that I've committed are countless as well. And that hurts, and I should hold myself to a higher standard. I should be ashamed to look in the mirror and say, I'm okay, I'm doing alright. I have to have hayah on such a higher level. Ashamed of myself, knowing that I could do better, that Allah SWT wa ta'ala has given me so much. So you have hayah of Allah SWT wa ta'ala and His position over us. You have hayah in front of the people, even though sometimes it might seem contradictory in what they expect of you. And you have hayah from yourself on a personal level. What happens when you don't have hayah? The ha and the ha. Do something about that, mind. What happens when you don't have hayah? Where does that lead to? This holistic concept is abandoned, is forgotten, it's not important, it's backwards, it's traditional, it doesn't belong in the 21st century. It's something that is archaic in nature, it's demanding a lot of backwards things. I don't need it. It's holding me back from all of my goals. Where does that lead to? The Prophet ﷺ told us in the hadith of Ibn Majah, and the hadith has some dispute over it. To be perfectly honest, some scholars considered it weak, but a lot of the scholars, they mentioned it in concordance with everything else that we know about hayah. It doesn't mention anything contradictory. Its meanings you'll find are true, whether it's authentic or not. And this is just as a sideline, it's something that the scholars have done throughout history and continue to do today. If a weak hadith adds to the discussion, it doesn't have something that's outrageous or out there or uncommon, or prescribing an act of worship, then they mention it commonly in conjunction with the other proofs, the hadith and ayat. So this hadith, and it is traceable back to the Prophet ﷺ, but the scholars differed in its authenticity. Some considered it authentic, some didn't. But anyway, it definitely goes back to Salman al-Farsi. So some scholars said it's a saying of Salman, and that is traceable back authentically, and some said it goes all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So either way, it's a saying of a companion at least. So it's reported that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ إِذَا أَرَادَ أَنْ يَهْلِكَ عَبْدًا نَزَعَ مِنْهُ الْحَيَاءَ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala desires or chooses, wills for the destruction of a slave, one of His servants, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at first glance it's a weird statement. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills or chooses destruction for one of His servants. How does that work? Is it just like, okay, there's 60 people here, 5% of them have to be destroyed, you're luck of the draw, you're out. You just didn't hit that magical number where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want you here anymore. Is that how it works? How's it work, man? Say it again, sorry. Okay, so He doesn't misguide, as He said in the Quran, anyone. He isn't turned astray, except that they are openly rebellious. They chose that path willingly. So it's from the extent of what the person shows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of actions and sincerity and emotions. So they, for example, do perform good actions, but none of them are sincere. They're not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In here, they're not submitting. They're not acknowledging Him as the only one worthy of their worship and obedience. Or they're living a dual lifestyle. The outside, I'm inshallah shaykh, and I have the hat and I have the beard, but behind closed doors, I'm doing my own thing. It's not your business, and I don't care. I'll never say that. I won't write it. But that's what this shows, and that's what my actions show. So for that reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives chances after chance after chance, and if we thought about our own personal lives, we'd find so many chances. How many doors did we choose to close, but He opened it anyway, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not who He is that He chooses randomly or unjustly, and this person is misguided. Rather, the person is given chance after chance after chance, and I don't need to prove to you anything. Look at your own life. I know that from my own life, how much Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, the chances and the opportunities, but when the person closes the door numerous times, sometimes he closes the last door. From their own will, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends this person on their own. They chose that path. So when they reach that station, when they reach that level, the first thing that is torn from them, that is taken away from them is Hayaah. Hayaah is the vanguard. It's the first fortification. It's that first wall in your faith. Once it goes, you're going to see how everything follows suit. So he's reported to have said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when this person reaches this level, is about to be destroyed, the first thing to go is their Hayaah, their modesty. They're not modest, they're not ashamed in front of Allah anymore. In terms of how they hold themselves and what they do with the trust that they're given, their body and their integrity and their honor and their morality, all that, they throw it down the drain. The first thing that goes is their Hayaah. They're not ashamed for the people to know them as a liar or untrustworthy or immoral or dishonest, whatever. I'm going to do me, and everyone has to accept that. Whether they speak out against me or not is irrelevant. They're not ashamed in front of themselves. They don't acknowledge how much Allah has given them, how many opportunities they've had, how many blessings they have that others are deprived of. They're not ashamed in front of all of this. So that's the first thing to go. فَإِذَا نَزَعَ مِنْهُ الْحَيَاءُ لَقِيتَهُ مَقِيتًا مُمَقَّتًا. So when Hayaah is torn from them, when they lose out on this modesty, they don't hold themselves in a manner that is full of integrity and morality and shame in front of Allah, then you will find them hateful and deserving of hate. They are hated by others and they deserve to be hated. They become despicable when they lose that Hayaah. When it diminishes and disappears, they become despicable. They're not people that others like, and they shouldn't be liked by others, he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because they have no shame. There are no barriers, there are no red lines for them. So they are hated and deserving of hate. فَإِذَا لَقِيتَهُمْ لَقِيتًا مُمَقَّتًا نُزِعَ مِنْهُ الْأَمَانَةِ. When you find them like that, when they reach this station, this level, they drop so low, they have no shame at all, then the second thing to go, the second barrier, is their amana, their trustworthiness. And this doesn't refer to if you lend them $5, they won't give it back. That's there as well. But speaking about the greater amana, which is a taklif al-shar'i, the concept of being accountable by the sharia, by what Allah revealed. They couldn't care less. Hayaah goes, they have no shame anymore. Nothing scratches them on the inside when they do something that's denounceable, that's immoral. And the Prophet ﷺ told us that's the easiest way to recognize evil. And if evil, sin, what's blameworthy, what's punishable, مَا حَاكَ فِي صَدْرِكَ, it scratches you on the inside, you're not comfortable doing it. You're ashamed, and he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ashamed for the people to see. So inside you're not comfortable, you're not settled, you don't have peace of mind or peace of heart doing this thing or saying these words, and you wouldn't like for some people or people in general to see it or to know it of you. So but that goes hand in hand with shame, because some people don't mind, they'll share it themselves. Right? They're the ones who posted it, no one has to spread it, no one has to whisper it behind, their palms. They openly say it to everyone else. They spread it, because they lost that barrier of shame. So the second thing to go is this amana, their ability or the principle of them caring about what's halal and haram, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked them to do or commanded them to fulfill and forbid them from. So that goes as well. فَإِذَا نُزِعَ مِنْهُ الْأَمَانَةِ لَقِيتَهُ خَائِنًا مُخَوَّنًا. When they lose the amana, they lose that trust of upholding what Allah forbid and commanded, living that way of life, and they're only able to ignore that or forget it or let it fall because they were ashamed in front of Allah or in front of themselves or in front of the people, then you will find them treacherous and considered so by others. No one trusts them. They're not going to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not going to uphold the number one trust that they were given, to obey Him, to live by His rules and regulations, to just try their best. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't ask for more than that. To sincerely try their best. If they couldn't even do that, what makes you think that you can trust them with $5? Or that you can trust them in a relationship? Or that you can trust them to take care of a trust that you have, something that you want taken care of. So they will become treacherous and considered so by others. They're diminishing in all three, if you think about it. The sight of Allah, the sight of the people, and their self-worth. Because they're not shy, they have no shame, they're not trustworthy,